everything I hate about the mainstream media and everything I hate about like leftist, not even leftist, but just like your average left-leaning fucking like person, the left-leaning zeitgeist, like everything I hate about it is the first thing he says, they go to him and he goes, I just want to say what a wonderful job the moderators did tonight. I mean, I thought they were just amazing, and I'd be perfectly happy if they were basically just the moderators for every debate from here on out. Just like, fuck you, man. You fucking spineless suck up. Like, it's one thing to be like, hey, yeah, you can have 4 female moderators, no problem, and I'm not going to treat them any different than guys. But you would never say that about any fucking dudes who are moderating. And then it's like you're just sucking up to women. Like, oh, look at, it's this fucking bullshit white knighting, like fucking virtue signaling nonsense. Oh, man, I just think the chicks are so great. I think they're even better than any dudes could do. And then you're like, why? There were maybe 2 interesting questions that were asked the entire night. Like the entire night, maybe 2 or 3 that you were like, oh, that was kind of a good question. I thought of a couple that were like, oh, I actually liked that question. And the rest is just this filler bullshit nonsense. Anyway.
And then and you had a bunch of people there. You're like, why are you still here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At some point, like in MMA, when guys lost too many in a row, I don't want to see him fight anymore. The guy's a loser. Like, I want to see the best in the sport. Go at it. You don't have a chance in this thing. Get out of here.
Well, it's like there's some people who are like almost legend, like in the MMA analogy, right? There are some people who are like legends. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, I almost want to see you can fight other like interesting fights. Some people are just really exciting fighters. But then there are some guys who are just like a wrestler who just fucking got beat like several times. And you're like, well, you're not going to be the champ. You don't really get into interesting, like fun fights to watch. It's like, what's the point? Okay. So my big takeaway from the debate was a lot of that, which is always kind of the big takeaway, that it's unbelievable. It really is. And even though I've said these things a lot in the past and we all kind of know this, it never stops amazing me that you're like, wow, we really are in a world where you have a 2.5-hour debate amongst these guys who are running for president. And it's so dumb. It's so dumb. And then you could just like read some book by some fucking random author who has no part in any of this and be like, that was fucking brilliant. That was the most mind-blowing shit. And this is really part of the flaw of democracy, is that they've just got to play to a whole bunch of people who don't know any better. And I'm not shitting on the people. They've got they got a life to live. They got a family to raise. They got friends. They got work. They got a lot of other things. But like, god damn, it's like 99% also boring and dumb.
They've kind of over debated that to watch them do the same boring thing twice was okay. But it's like the 5th time I'm watching them, 6th time.
Yeah, it's hard. And it seems for the most part, there's nothing new or interesting. All right, so here's what I was thinking we'd do. We'd kind of go through the candidates and how we felt they did, go through the moments that we thought were the biggest moments and the key takeaways from the debate. So the only one who I'm going to play video clips from is Tulsi, where there's a YouTube clip up of her entire debate performance. I thought we'd go through that. Obviously, as I've said before, Tulsi, to me, she's my favorite of the field. She's the most interesting of the field. And the obvious reason is, as Scott Horton said recently, I thought it was the best way to put it, is that she's just, he was like, why do like libertarians and the articles that are like right-wingers like Tulsi Gabbard or whatever. It's like, well, the only reason any of us like Tulsi Gabbard is because she's the least bad on the most important issue. And that's really it. It's like, okay, and that's enough. The state of things is so bleak that's enough to get you kind of like, oh, okay. Well, she's actually saying we shouldn't spend trillions of dollars murdering people and destroying nations and getting, our fucking young men killed and have their fucking, become amputees. Like, maybe it's not a great strategy for a society to fucking, like at first it's like, maybe it's immoral to fucking slaughter millions of people, of innocent people. And then maybe it's not a great strategy for a nation to spend themselves, trillions of dollars into debt to get your most like fucking, your like strongest, most physically capable young men and turn them into amputees. Maybe this isn't a great strategy. Maybe this isn't the way to go. And she's the one person who kind of hints at that at least a little bit. So I would say overall, like I'd give Tulsi Gabbard like a C, maybe a C+ for her debate performance this time. I really do. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I want her to do well. I sent her campaign money twice because I want there to be somebody talking to the left half of America, like telling them that the wars should be an issue. This is something we should talk about and leading. It's so great that she leads with the most important issue and is pretty much on the right side, or at least, as Scott Horton said, the least worst on that issue.
But even she, I don't know, there's something about her for a pretty lady talking about the most important issue. She's somehow also making it she's falling a little flat.
Yes.
It almost feels like I've had those comedy sets, you're phoning it a little bit and you listen back to it and you're like, I just wasn't selling it. That's what it feels like with her.
I think that, so I was talking to my wife about this the other night as we were watching it. And I was like, man, she's just not good at these things.
Yeah.
Like, she's just not good at these debates. She doesn't say something that grabs you and makes you go like, holy shit, that's a good point. And she's got such a good point. And my wife, Lauren, was like, she was like, well, what do you want her to do? You want her to like yell and curse like you do? And yeah, like, I get what she's saying, but I was like, no, that would be a bad idea. That I should not be the person running for president, because yes, that is not going to be the best way.
But she could show us her kids.
But she could bullets in you. No, but like, but you got to have something, like a little bit of passion. I mean, like, Ron Paul was the most gentlemanly person in the world, but he would say something that makes you go like, oh, fuck. I remember one time Ron Paul said, and there's so many clips of him in the debate, but he said one time, they go, the question was something vague. I'm almost going to get this right completely. But the question was something vague. Like, they go, so they were like, Ron Paul, you oppose these wars. You're to the left of Obama on fighting these wars, yet you're seeking the nomination of the Republican Party. Are you out of step with the party? Are you seeking the nomination of the wrong party? And he just responds and he goes, well, and they said something about him being unelectable because he was so far to the left, quote, the left on the war issue. Because this was 2008, you got to remember, George W. Bush years. So, and he goes, well, I mean, we haven't even had one primary yet. This is only like our third debate. So I think it's a little premature for the media to dictate who the candidate's going to be. And then that kind of got an applause. Like, just that right away, you're like, oh yeah, this is the media telling you who's electable and unelectable. And he goes, well, if you think about it, if you measured everything I've ever said, everything I've ever written, every vote I've ever casted against the Constitution, I'm a strict constitutionalist. So you're saying the Republican Party doesn't want me because I actually believe in the Constitution? And he goes, I'm the most conservative member up here. I voted against more spending and waste in government than anyone on this stage. And then that kind of gets an applause because they're kind of like, well, yeah, we're supposed to be for that, right? And he goes, look, so why should I not be a Republican? Because I talk about a non-interventionist foreign policy? That was the advice of the founders. And then he goes, and I'll never forget this moment. He goes, let me see if I can get this straight. So we need to borrow $10 billion from China, who's a communist government. They steal this money from their people. So we borrow $10 billion from China. Then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government. And then we go to war. We lose all these lives, spend all this money promoting democracy in Iraq. So what's going on here? And it got like a big applause rate. And it's just that simple. He goes, wait, what is this whole thing? And if you listen to that, you're like, holy shit. That's like a great way. Now, Ron Paul was not the most charismatic, well-spoken. He's not like Obama. You're not like, man, that guy can just like charm the pants off anyone. He's just like a country doctor who's telling the truth. But he just goes, wait a minute. So you're telling me we can take money from a communist country to fucking support a military dictator who overthrew a democratically elected leader, and then we go to war supposedly promoting democracy? What is this whole thing? And then I'm not conservative because I speak, like, just little things like that where you kind of go like, wow, that's a fucking powerful thing to say. Now, he wasn't screaming or cursing at anybody. You don't have to do it my way. Sure, I would scream. I'd be like, you're all a bunch of fucking war criminals. But that probably wouldn't be effective. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to do something. And this is the thing that Tulsi Gabbard needs to realize that I think she doesn't enough. It's like she does this thing where she's very calm, collected, and like, I want to show you that I can be a leader and I'm a serious person. And okay, fine, if that's your style. But you gotta like fucking, sit down and fucking write this out. Like think of a few really what's the most powerful, point? What's the most powerful 10 points? Look, like I was saying before with the podcast, we do 4.5 hours a week. You have a minute on TV. You should be able to talk about this for 5 hours, right? So you whittle that down to 8 minutes. This is going to be this is the formula that I figured out. This is like when people say I'm really good on those cable news shows. That was my humble brag. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say I'm fantastic at this. But it's like, well, come on, man. I mean, if I can talk about this shit for hours and hours and hours, then why... If I'm whittling it down to my top 30 seconds, that's going to be a really great 30 seconds, just inherently, right?